I'm going to start today with a little confession. I am the quintessential overachiever. I am always working on some new goal or project. I got good grades in school. I got a 4.0 in graduate school. I grew up believing that if you work hard, you can make almost anything happen. And I've spent most of my life working really hard and usually reaping the rewards of that hard work in terms of outward success. I'm in a profession that I love. I got married. I had 2 kids. I adopted some dogs. I built a cute house in the suburbs. It was a picture-perfect life from the outside. But in 2017, my world was falling apart, and all of my usual strategies for success weren't working. I panicked. By the end of 2017, I had gone from somebody who easily worked 60-plus-hour work weeks and still managed to cook dinner for my family more nights than not, show up at all of my kids' events, throw amazing dinner parties, volunteer my time at causes I cared about, to someone who could barely keep her head above water. I couldn't find the energy or the desire to get out of bed and go back to my crazy work schedule. I stopped cooking. Opening a bag of frozen vegetables felt like prepping for a 6-course gourmet dinner. I didn't want to be social, gone were the dinner parties and the weekend plans with friends. I slept more. I gave up early morning meetings. I worked out less and less. I was turning into the laziest person I knew. Or at least that's how it felt. But here's the thing, I wasn't lazy. I was going through a profound shift, and waking up every day believing that I was lazy only made things worse. The truth is that I was trying to navigate my way through some of the hardest life transitions I'd ever felt. I was ending a 20-plus year marriage. My divorce had turned unexpectedly contentious and emotionally abusive. My children were launching out into the world, my youngest moving across the country for college, and my eldest trying to find his footing in adulthood amidst the chaos of all of our family turmoil. Now, to be fair, it was not all trauma and upheaval. I was also now the sole owner of a company I had co-founded several years before, and business was booming. Exponential growth, new opportunity brought positive but demanding responsibility. We live in a world obsessed with busyness and productivity. We measure worth based on how much you get done and the tangible markers of your accomplishments, like how much money you make, how many followers you have on Instagram, how many people you're in charge of at work. And if you're a woman, well, not only are you busy achieving out in the world, but you also need to be at home taking care of several people, kids, partners, parents, whoever. In her book, The Will to Change, Bell Hooks refers to our modern capitalist society as dominator culture. This framework, rooted in white supremacy, misogyny, classism, and a whole host of other hyper-individualistic values, teaches us that external power is what matters most. We are constantly being acculturated to find our worth and value as humans through the dominance of others and the accumulation of things. And one of the cornerstones to upholding this system is the idea of laziness. Now, the Cambridge Dictionary defines laziness as not willing or not wanting to work or put forth effort to do something. What's missing from this definition is a curiosity as to why anyone who's able to do something chooses, consciously or unconsciously, not to. Quite simply, laziness lacks context. The concept of lazy as a character flaw, to be corrected and avoided at all costs, has at least some of its roots in American history. We use lazy to justify oppressive policies, inequitable access to resources, and even physical violence. We can see this play out particularly clearly in the treatment of marginalized people. We have a long history of calling Black and brown people lazy. Same thing applies to anyone who finds themselves living in impoverished conditions or otherwise falling short of popular standards of success. But was an enslaved person lazy for refusing to work harder, or were they resisting the abusive treatment and psychological torment of their situation? Is a student from an underfunded community lazy, or do they simply lack the necessary resources to succeed in an educational system? Was I lazy as I let my productivity slip and withdrew from my life? Or was I having a natural natural response to overwhelming heartbreak, uncertainty, and change. We take behavior out of context and decide it is a character flaw in the individual. And while the roots of laziness may be tied to the historical exclusion of certain groups, it is so integral to our modern culture that we all subscribe to it. Regardless of race, gender, ethnicity, or any other identity, our society feeds off the use of laziness as an insult. There is no middle ground between constant doing and shameful laziness. We've internalized this idea, and it is affecting our relationships, our communities, and our physical and mental health. As a therapist, I see the impact every day. So many of my clients attribute the symptoms of their depression, anxiety, burnout to laziness and failure. Instead of thinking to themselves, I deserve support, there's something happening with my health, they hide their pain away like a shameful character flaw instead of a legitimate health concern worthy of treatment, care, and compassion. And despite what I know as a psychotherapist, I'm really no different than my clients. I cannot let go of the self-criticism every time I see myself not working as hard or doing as much as I've been conditioned to believe was productive and therefore good. But much of what we call laziness is actually just symptomatic of something far more insidious, such that most of us don't notice it in our lives, myself included. That's why therapists need to have therapists. For the last few years, my therapist has gently and consistently reminded me of the context of my life. She helped me to challenge the self-criticism and encouraged me to stop abandoning my emotional self. So many of us deny our feelings, not because we're all emotionally stunted or feelings are bad. We abandon this part of ourselves because we're exhausted and often unskilled at navigating our own inner landscape. This is largely because we are constantly being told what we feel is not true or not valuable, or most of all, that it is what makes us lazy. So when 2020 rolled around and suddenly I felt even dramatically more unproductive, it was my therapist who helped me resist the instinct to call that laziness, and instead helped me to acknowledge it for what it really was: compassion fatigue. Compassion fatigue, or more accurately, empathic distress, is a deep physical and emotional exhaustion that often manifests with a desire to disengage from others in ways that are easily labeled laziness and disinterest if we're not careful. One of the key elements to empathic distress is the seeming inability to empathize. Something I had once considered my superpower suddenly took superhuman effort to tap into. Now, I like to think about empathy as our I feel you vibe. It's the experience when you know exactly what another person is feeling because you felt that way too, even if the situation was different. We empathize with the good and the bad of life. We use our own emotional history as a frame of reference so that we can feel what someone else is experiencing in the present moment. It's how we build deep, meaningful connection. But if we are not skilled at noticing and attending to our own feelings, we can easily become overwhelmed, and that leads to empathic distress. Empathic distress, as defined by researcher Tanya Singer, is the strong, aversive, self-oriented response to the suffering of others, characterized by a desire to withdraw from the situation in order to protect oneself from excessive negative feelings. That's a mouthful. Or wordy, us researchers. In less clinical terms, we get so flooded with our own feelings while trying to empathize with other people's feelings that we just end up checking out altogether. I believe that much of what we call lazy is actually the result of empathic distress. Most of us have very little capacity for the normal ups and downs of life because we are flooded every single day. We are inundated with images and stories of violence, injustice, and rejection against people who look like us, no matter which us you identify with. We live in a world permeated with feelings of fear, anger, grief, anxiety. We live in a world that is built on the dehumanization of certain groups of people, the over-prioritizing external measures of success, and that rewards the appearance of happiness rather than honoring our actual lived experiences. All the while being given the message that if you feel oppressed, unsafe, undervalued, unloved, unsuccessful, it's a failing of your character and not the system. I'm going to guess that some of you would like to check out of my talk right now, just listening to me talk about this. Don't feel bad. I get it. That feeling, that is empathic distress in action. Our mostly unconscious, self-protective desire to disengage, dismiss, and dissociate from anything that taps into our most difficult feelings because we lack the resources to manage them. We want to withdraw and often double down on the dominant culture's value system that tells us external things will bring us relief. We mimic happiness, we attempt to bypass pain. We deny our very nature as human beings by chastising ourselves for having an emotional experience. We betray our humanity and we label ourselves as lazy. But what we perceive as laziness in ourselves and in others is really us being burnt out on the painful suffering in the world, layered on top of whatever unique curveballs your own life has to offer. I want to be clear, empathic distress does not happen simply because we are overwhelmed by other people's pain. It happens because we lack the internal resources to manage our own pain. We end up lost in a muddled up mess of feelings within us and around us. But there is good news. We can heal our collective empathic distress simply by learning to gently attend to our own emotional well-being. By caring for ourselves first, we can hold space for each other in ways that are loving and nourishing instead of painful and depleting. The secret to our healing is compassion. First for ourselves, then for each other. Self-compassion is the practice of being warm, loving, and accepting of ourselves no matter what. It is much more than a collection of self-care activities to do every week. It is a way of being with yourself and in the world, a mindset of self-worth, and a commitment to treating ourselves as valuable in every moment and through every perceived mistake, trauma, and difficulty. Contrary to what society wants you to believe, compassion does not breed complacency. It is not synonymous with coddling. It is, in fact, the antidote to what we call laziness. It is the salve to soothe our shame, self-criticism, and exhaustion. And more than that, I believe it is an act of radical rebellion. In a world committed to dehumanizing people in an effort to glamorize productivity, self-compassion is a gentle and powerful way to dismantle the underlying value system that keeps us believing the laziness lie. It allows us to be curious about why we act and feel the way we do, instead of stuck in a constant state of judgment, self-punishment, and escapism. According to researcher Kristen Neff, there are 3 main components to self-compassion: self-kindness, mindful awareness, and common humanity. Each offers us a way to both challenge systemic oppression while more fully attending to our deepest needs as human beings. Self-kindness is the answer to the dehumanizing and devaluing messages we get every day. Now, much like all the other components of self-compassion, this is a practice. This is not something that you are going to master and forevermore do well. Trust me, I have tried. It is a commitment to try to practice tenderness towards yourself every day. This can look like self-care rituals. It's your healthy habits. It's how you nourish your body and being thoughtful about the content you allow your mind to consume. Self-kindness is all about intentionally showing yourself love in big and small ways, free from judgment and comparison. Mindful awareness, it gives us the ability to separate our feelings from the feelings and expectations of others. It makes room for us to be empathetic without becoming overwhelmed or distressed. It frees us from emotional flooding so that we can better notice what feelings are mine, which are yours, and what exists between us. We can cultivate this awareness through prayer or meditation or by any number of daily practices that bring you back to the present moment, like eating with the TV and phone off, noticing your breath, sitting in silence for a few moments. I like to check in with myself every day with a couple of questions. Ask yourself, how do I really feel? What do I need most in this moment? How will I treat myself with a little bit more tenderness today? And while much of the work of self-compassion happens inside of us, it must be built on a foundation of common humanity. We have to translate our work of inner care into one of outer care and connection. When I reflect on my own struggle to find self-compassion, I am acutely aware of how alone I felt. I didn't give myself the space to recognize that my pain, however hard it was, also connected me to so many other people who could love and support me through it. By sharing my stories more openly, first in therapy, and then slowly with family and friends, I rediscovered a path to honoring my own messy, complex, imperfect existence through a lens of compassion. Seek out those places and relationships that let you feel seen and honor your humanity. And if the idea of connecting with people that vulnerably makes you uncomfortable or feels a little scary, therapy is a really good place to start. In order for us to abandon the laziness lie, we must acknowledge that everything happens in context. Our behaviors and feelings are not character flaws to condemn. They are expressions of our experiences to be explored and inquired about. Instead of hiding away our pain as if it were shameful or something that we're not worthy of support around, we need to begin to see it as a place for connection. No one may have experienced what you have or what I have, but we all know heartbreak. We all know grief, shame, rejection. In sharing from a place of compassion, we actually reduce the overwhelm of empathic distress. Naming our feelings shrinks them back to a manageable size. And when we can do that in community, through compassionate conversation, we remind ourselves that we are part of a common human experience, one that can fortify our resilience instead of depleting us. I believe that self-compassion feeds our souls. Interpersonal compassion nurtures our relationships, and collective compassion will allow us to reimagine our communities. And it is at the intersection of these that we can break free from the false narrative of laziness and step into a more meaningful and authentic way of being.